My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
If your child is considering something as big as joining the military, you can bet they're taking the time to do some research. You can too, by visiting todaysmilitary.com, because their success tomorrow begins with your support today.
This podcast is part of E2C Network, where we share the whole Auburn experience.
Hello and welcome to War Horses, the only college equestrian podcast that's ready to get you going for the 24-25 season. I'm your host, Auburn Elvis. Let's talk about some college equestrian. So when last we talked, SMU had just won their second national championship in a row. Well, we had a lot of stuff happen in the offseason. I'm going to bring you up to speed on all of that right now. So over in South Carolina, their head coach, Boo Major, she retired. Okay, she had led the program for about 26 seasons, overseen, countless All-Americans, 3 national championships. So she retires. Okay. So with her retiring, South Carolina did what a program with a history of winning championships does. Basically, when they're tired of finishing 4th in the conference every year, they go out and they get the best coach available. And in college equestrian, that's Carol Gwynn. So, yeah, South Carolina hired away the 2-time national championship winning coach away from SMU. Now, there is some history here. Before her 10-year stint leading SMU, Gwynn was a South Carolina assistant coach from like 2010 to 2014, I think. So she has a history. She knows the program. She, was a longtime assistant there before she became a head coach. So it makes a lot of sense that she would move back to that area and oversee that program. Now, with her taking on the reins of the whole program, she's going to bring in her own people, her own staff. Let's see, she hired Western coach T.R. Potts. Remember that last name? That's going to come up later. Ashley Duda for the jumping seat. She is a she still is, an R-rated judge. And if you've listened to the show before, you probably heard me sort of joke around about R-rated judge Sissy Wicks, who's a friend of the podcast. So I guess Ashley just curses as much as Sissy does. So that's why they're both R-rated. Then Kathy Woosley-Lewis is the assistant Western coach and recruiting coordinator. So all of these, or most all of them, are basically coming from the professional ranks. That seems to be a hallmark of Gwen's staffs that she assembles. Generally, she gets people from the professional ranks. She doesn't have a lot of recent NCEA riders on her staff like you'll see at many of the other schools. So she does things a little bit differently. And so that's what she's replicating there at South Carolina. Now, speaking of her staff there, her move over to South Carolina opens up the head coaching position at SMU. Well, I'm sure when she was getting ready to move, she probably talked to her assistants and said, hey, maybe, y'all would consider coming down there. One of those, Brad Kearns, I'm sure also SMU probably talked to him and said, hey, now, before you make any big decisions, maybe talk to us because we want to have a conversation with you about where our program's going. And so, after everybody speaks to everybody else, it was announced that SMU had hired Brad as their new head coach. And I'll just say as an aside, it doesn't hurt that his daughter is an All-American rider and she has another year of eligibility. And in the day of instant transfers from one school to another, promoting Brad kind of, gives the program the best chance of not seeing all those riders going down south to South Carolina there. Now, it doesn't look like he's made any sweeping changes with his staff. I think they've retained everybody. And for now, they really probably don't need to make any big changes because when you promote from within like that, a lot of times really what you're looking for is maintaining consistency. And that seems to be what SMU is getting there. So yeah. Now, this is actually very similar to how Auburn promoted Jessica Braswell to head coach 2 years ago when Greg Williams retired. And speaking of Auburn, we had some coaching changes over there too. Western coach Taylor Cyril, she stepped down, and Auburn has rehired former Western coach Mary Meneely. Now, Meneely was Auburn's Western coach for about 7 years, from 2015 to 22, and she was part of that incredible run of success that Auburn saw right before COVID and a little bit into COVID. So I really like this move for Auburn. I think the Western teams have been struggling with inconsistency in the last couple of years, and there's a hope that Meneely can get the Western riders performing at a higher level going forward. And so, yeah, I think that's why Auburn made that move. Other coaching changes around the country. Over at Baylor, they've made a lot of staffing changes. Things have not been going well for the Bears recently. They missed out on the playoffs after a disappointing year last year. Head coach Casey Maxwell, she basically decided to bring in a lot of new talent on her staff. She's added Grace Boston as the new jumping seat coach. If that name sounds familiar, it's because she was a 4-year starter over at Texas A&M. She also has a twin sister, Sarah, apparently, who rode for Baylor, so there's a connection there. Baylor also added Bobby Pittock as the new Western coach. Now, Pittock was the Western coach over at South Carolina, so with the coaching changes there, she became available for Baylor to snap her up. Georgia also made some coaching changes as well. Head coach Megan Bonig promoted Mackenzie Lance to associate head coach and brought on Matt Lance, pretty sure he's her dad, as an assistant, primarily focusing on reining. So you read between the lines here. I think recently the NCEA has opened up the restrictions on the coaching staff sizes in a lot of sports, maybe all sports even. And so I think you're going to start seeing these larger programs adding more personnel to the coaching staff, even when they don't, get rid of anybody. So in Georgia's case, I think that's what you're seeing here. You got Matt Lance. He's respected in the professional ranks. I think they're from the Michigan area, so he gets to move down to Georgia, where he can basically help coach the Rainers, and he gets to see his grandchild more. So it's a pretty sweet deal for him. Also, Georgia added Grace Himes as a Western assistant. This former Bulldog rider, she's taken advantage of that aforementioned increase in staff sizes that we're starting to see here. South Dakota State made a head coaching change. Former Jackrabbits assistant Camara Brown has been named the new head coach. Brown rode at Delaware State, and she was an assistant there as well, and she was an assistant at South Dakota State for a while, and then went out in the professional ranks, and now she's back. She even was a student assistant over at Oklahoma State, so she's been around the league for a good long time, and she also retained, Allie Krindler as her jumping seat coach. So, got some new leadership there. Over in Minnesota Crookston, head coach and former Auburn rider Haley Pembroke, if it's Pembroke, don't fix it, has added Lindsay Mortimer as her assistant coach. She comes from the professional ranks down in Texas, and before that, she rode at Texas A&M and a little bit over at Texas Tech in the IHSA team, I think. I believe she's overseeing the jumping seat riders there up in Crookston. Lots and lots of off-season changes, and I tell you, this is really a sign of a healthy sport. It shows that these programs are not content with the status quo, that they want to improve, they want to grow, and it's good to see the number of member schools that are making this investment in new personnel. Now, normally we would have, recaps of meets. We ain't got no meets, so we're not going to do that. We're going to move right along into our rankings. Now, this is the preseason. And here's how we're going to do this. Every season, I track all y'all's rides. I keep the statistics on everybody. So when we roll into a new season, I go and I look at the official rosters, and I look at how much scoring talent each team is returning, and I quantify that, and I rank the teams based on their returning talent. All right? Now, I don't do like the NCEA rankings do, where they basically look at last season's results, and then they add in their own personal bias, and then they spit out some unrealistic set of rankings, okay? So mine aren't like that. Mine are real. Mine are based on actual dang numbers. Now, from time to time, my rankings are actually similar to theirs because they get lucky. But the methodology here is what's important. I am giving you things that are based on stats, okay? One other thing, I'm going to list the top returning riders for each team, so it's going to get a little boring if I'm not talking about your school, so that's okay. A lot of parents, they like to hear their daughter's names here on the show. I've been told I need to mention the riders' names a little bit more, so I'm going to do that. It's going to be a lot of names, but you can zone out when it's not your team and just start paying attention when I get to your team. So, here we go. Preseason, number 1 is TCU. In terms of returning points production, TCU returns just over 11 points per meet of talent. That's number 1 in the country. Now, they're doing that with 18 returning starters, which is a lot. You only got 20 spots on your starting lineup. Most big programs return about 10 to 15 starters from the previous season, so this is going to help them maintain what they've built these last few years, especially in the early part of the season when you really rely on that veteran talent. Now, when you look at their top talent, these are the riders who average 50% or better in their winning percentage. They have 11 of those type of riders. We're going to call them quality riders, and they earn what we'll call quality rider points on average, and they average about 7.59 points per meet, okay? So who are those 11 quality riders? Okay, I'm going to name some names here. They've got Ashley Scully and Ella Boswick in fences, and on the flat, Scully and Boswick are joined with Laurel Smith and Lily Goldstein. In horsemanship, they return Jessica McAllister, Shay Grain, Peyton Buttel, and Marcella B. And in reining, they have Jessica McAllister, Shay Graham, and Kayleen Cunningham are their top returning talents in reining. All right, so that's TCU. They're number 1. Number 2 is SMU. SMU returns 15 starters from last season for an average points production of 8.81 points per meet. And when you look at their 12 quality starters, again, that's the starters who are averaging 50% or better in their winning percentage, their quality points per meet is 7.52, which is actually second best in the nation. So you would figure that. The top returners are Ellie Yeager, Augusta Iwasaki, and Hannah Hooch in fences, Hensley Humphrey, Emma Engel, and Yeager and Iwasaki on the flat. In horsemanship, they have Nia Kearns, Alexia Black, and Jana Lucasi. They return, and in reining, they have Shalise Head. I've been told that's Shalise, not Chalice. And Maria Richards are coming back as well, and they're in reining. So they are the number 2 returning roster in the sport. So SMU is number 2. Number 3 is Texas A&M. The Aggies return 17 starters. These riders average 8.74 points per meet, and their quality riders, and they have 12 quality starters, average 7.44 points per meet, which is third in the country. And in case you hadn't guessed, this is kind of the stat I'm leaning on the most for these rankings, is how many points do your quality starters bring to the table? And these quality starters for the Aggies are, in fences, Brooke Brombaugh, Alexa Long, Kate Egan, Allie Truting, and on the flat are Riley Shuffelt, Devin H. Thomas, Maggie Nealon, Devin M. Thomas, and as an aside, this is the last season we're going to have these 2 Thomases that are messing up my stats every week. Once the elder Thomas, Devon, finally departs, recording the stats from Texas A&M meets is going to get a lot easier for me. Anyway, back to the quality starters. In horsemanship, they have Hannah Oleson, Ellie Gerbrandt, and Millie Landon. And in reining, they have Lauren Hansen and Maddie Guston. Okay, so that's Texas A&M. They're number 3. At number 4, we have Auburn. The Tigers return 14 starters, which is about typical, and those riders bring in about 8.29 points per meet. Their 12 quality riders average 7.4 points per meet. And Auburn's quality riders are, in fences, Mary Grace Seegers, Sophie Steckbeck, Ellie Ferrigno, and Avery Glenn. Over on the flat, Seegers, Ferrigno, and Glenn are the flat returners. In horsemanship, they have Alexia Tordoff, Caroline Fredenberg, Sydney Swallam, and Brooke Jolstad. And in reining, they have Caroline Buchanan returning. All right, so that's Auburn at number 4. Number 5 is Georgia. The Bulldogs return 16 starters for an average of 8.02 points per meet. They have 11 quality starters, and they average 7.17 points per meet. Their quality starters are, in fences, Tessa Brown, Catalina Peralta, Tessa Downey, and Melissa Darren Foster. On the flat, they have Sophie Pila, Catalina Peralta again, Jordan Turing, and Jessica Guginski. In horsemanship, they have Jillian Stopperich, and in reining, they have Reagan Shepard and Shelby Lynch. On to number 6, and that is Oklahoma State. Yeehaw! The Cowgirls return 14 starters for 7.82 points per meet, on average, and their 10 quality starters average 6.38 points per meet. Those quality starters are Riley Hogan and Bella Holloway in fences, Hogan and Hannah Dodd on the flat, Claire McDowell and June Robertson in horsemanship, and in reining, Quincy Clark, Tristan Bagby, Emma Filatro, and Abby Budd. Number 7 is South Carolina. Okay, so this is an interesting team statistically. Over the past 2 seasons, the Gamecocks have cycled a lot of different riders through their lineups. They returned 21 riders with 5 or more starts, which is the threshold that I use to say, okay, you are a starter. So among those 21 returning starters, and again, there's only 20 spots, they average 8.89 points per meet, which is actually second in the nation. But when you look at their quality starters, they only have 8 of those. And again, those are riders who are averaging wins 50% of the time or better. Their quality points per meet drops down to 4.71. So the Gamecocks have really been going with quantity over quality recently, but they do have quality riders, and they are in fences, Natalie Jane and Alexia Orliento. On the flat, Jane and Sophie Mitchell and Grace Rabb. In horsemanship, they have Alexis Potts, the former Auburn starter, and Jordan Humpert. And in reining, they return Madeline McNeil. So, earlier when I mentioned that South Carolina had a new Western coach, T.R. Potts, yes, he is from South Carolina. So he got hired, and his daughter decided to leave Auburn and join him over at South Carolina. So she instantly becomes their best horsemanship rider for the Gamecocks. On we go to number 8. Now, as longtime listeners will know, the top 8 is really the most important group because only the top 8 teams are going to get invited to the national championship tournament. So if you're not in the top 8 in the preseason, you definitely want to be in it when you get to the postseason. And that number 8 team right now is UC Davis. The Aggies return 12 starters that earn a respectable 5.27 points per meet. Their 8 quality returning starters average 4.66, so not too much of a drop-off. Those quality riders are, in fences, Emma Jolly and Lauren Kolb, or Colby. I'm not sure. It's one of those, or maybe it's something else. On the flat, Margaret Frank and Marion Gillen. In horsemanship, Natasha Repogel, Maddie Gregory, and Ruby Nahum. And they have Nicole Schroyer, I'm going to say Schroyer, in reining. All right, so what other teams are looking to break into that top 8? Well, at number 9, we have Baylor. The Bears returned 17 starters for an average of 6.93 points per meet, but among their 7 quality starters, they only averaged 3.9 points per meet. Those quality starters are, in fences, Lauren Reed. On the flat, Madison Mitchell and Lauren Reed again. Lauren Jurgensen and Annie Voorhees also on the flat. In horsemanship, they have Alexis Rutledge, and in reining, they have Riley Kachat, who I'm probably going to start referring to as Riley Kachow. On we go to number 10, UT Martin. The Skyhawks returned 15 starters for an average of 6.53 points per meet, and their 6 quality starters account for 4.24 points per meet. And, okay, my notes are all messed up here, so I'm just going to say the names, and you figure out what event you're in. In fences, I think it's Katie Mills. In flat, it's Sophia Sundom, Lexi Bailey, Mia McAfoos, or maybe in horsemanship, and Logan Pavinsky is in reining, but I also have Lexi Bailey's name in here, so I'm not sure what she does. She's probably reining as well. All right, I got a little mixed up in my notes, and I'm just going to push on. That's fine. You know who you are. Number 11 is Delaware State. The Hornets return 11 starters for an average of 5.6 points per meet. Their 5 quality starters bring in 3.14 points per meet, so almost pi. They are Olivia Brown over fences, Brown and Victoria Croston on the flat, and Claire Andrews in horsemanship and reining. Number 12 is Fresno State. The Bulldogs return 13 starters for 4.98 points per meet. Their 3 quality starters average 1.75 points per meet, and they are Sage Lindvall in fences, Abby Goodard in horsemanship, and Anna Becker in reining. Number 13 is South Dakota State. The Jackrabbits' 13 returning starters average 4.39 points per meet, and their 3 quality starters average 1.48 points per meet. Their quality starters are Hannah Steele on the flat, Paige Wellendorf in horsemanship, and Paige Butterfield in reining. And number 14 is Minnesota Crookston. The Golden Eagles return 9 starters and average 1.85 points per meet. They don't have returning starters with 50% or better winning percentages, although Ava Jo Glenn in horsemanship and Madison Wojcik in reining are fairly close to that threshold. So that's all the dual discipline teams. I'm going to go through the single discipline teams returning starters next week. That's going to give Bridgewater and Centenary one more week to put their rosters on their websites. Of course, with Centenary, I don't really have a lot of historical stuff to go by, but there's a chance they could have a rider from another school who I previously have stats on, and that would help. Probably not going to happen, but hey. Anyway, Bridgewater, Centenary, go ahead and get your darn rosters on the websites. We don't have any upcoming meets. I already said that. We're in the scrimmage phase of the season, and in the past I've tried to analyze scrimmages, but it's really tough to draw conclusions of any worth from any of that riding. So the teams are still making all their evaluations, so you might see some girl riding in the scrimmage and then you never see her ride again in a real meet. So we're just going to wait until the season starts, and that's only a week and a half away, so yeah, that's how we're going to do it. So before we go, I often end the show on a little soapbox issue or some other final thoughts. In this episode, I'm going to take some time to say a few words about outgoing NCEA director Leah Fiorentino. I've met her a few times at the national championships. I interviewed her once here for the show a while back, and she has decided to step down this summer. I wanted to say that her time leading the league has seen probably its most exciting series of growth in the whole league history. She was at the helm back when the postseason got canceled because of COVID, and then she oversaw the resumption of competition during COVID. She oversaw the numerous changes to the national championship structure, including the move to Ocala, the 8-team bracket that we now have, going from 4 riders to 5 riders in that, which was a wonderful decision. The creation of a single discipline national championship and their own tournament, that was wonderful. The inclusion and growth of all these new single discipline teams, and just tons and tons of little details that most people wouldn't even know about, like trying to get these little tiebreaker math on all your darn score sheets correct. All of that and many of the things that I don't know about, just thank you and congratulations to Doc Fiorentino for your service to the sport. So it's been well appreciated and people notice, believe me. Also, want to welcome Samantha K. Hughes as the new NCEA Executive Director. I don't know much about her, but her bio on the NCEA site seems pretty distinguished, and I look forward to getting to know her as well. So, yeah, some exciting times of growth for the sport. Lots of change, but like I said, that's, a good thing. It's an investment in the sport, and that's something we can all get behind and appreciate. That is all for this episode. I am your host, Auburn Elvis. Thank you very much for listening, and war horses.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode on the E2C Network. On your way out, I want to remind you to stop by e2cnetwork.com. It's your one-stop shop for all our content across our podcast, YouTube channel, and much more. To stay up to date with us, make sure you're following social media accounts such as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. While our content here may always be Auburn sports heavy, if it's orange and blue, it's what we do. War Eagle.